Well, what really motivated me to run for office, and I've run for office several times in the past, but in 2010 I ran for statewide office in Massachusetts. My platform was total transparency, and it really resonated with people across the political spectrum. So even though I ran in a partisan race, in a primary, and I ran as a Republican, and I lost my primary, one of the Democratic candidates for treasurer really liked my message and said that if he was elected treasurer, he would put the state checkbook online. And in fact, he did win the election, and he did put the state checkbook online. So I'm taking some credit for that as a partial victory. You know, that the message carried on. And even to this day, people around the state recognize me. Hey, there's Mr. Transparency, the state checkbooks are there. What motivated me was over 10 years of researching state budget data and finding a lot of obfuscation and lack of clarity and lack of honesty. And there was this disparity where we have a state budget process. Every year by the end of June, we have to submit our July 1 fiscal budget. And they would always talk about the budget. And the budget was always a lot smaller than total spending every year. And it wasn't until a state checkbook went online this year that they finally put in big print on the state website that total spending was actually, 45% more than the budget. There's that much off-budget spending. And that was another victory for me. It was like reminding people, say, look, before we can argue about what's an appropriate program, appropriate spending level, let's have an honest discussion about what the level of spending is. Right, before I would get into arguments with teachers and cops and firefighters, and they would get all worried about getting cut, right? If you cut the budget or you don't raise taxes. And I said, do you know that all in Massachusetts, total spending, public safety, all of education, including higher ed, and the roads and bridges, is only about 21% of total state spending? I said, so you have another, 79%. It's other stuff. I said, so let's prioritize, but we can have an honest discussion. So now we have the tools to begin to have an honest discussion. That's really what transparency is all about. It's not a means, it's not an end to itself, it's a means to an end. And we want to empower the citizenry. And you meet people here at this camp, it's been great. There's people who have interests on criminal activism, right? They want to know. There was a woman in the session I ran who talked about how she was worried about the fact that there are repeat felony offenders of drug dealing that are being released back into her neighborhood. And she wanted to know why. And she can't get the data from the courts. Why is this a revolving door? Like, you were convicted of a felony drug distribution charge. Why are you back in my neighborhood again? Things like that, And then some people in Massachusetts, people are working on parking ticket data. In certain towns, it's like to figure out where the fairness and unfairness is of distribution of parking tickets versus who can appeal and get their parking ticket waived. Things like that. And it's at every level because you want to find a way that it connects with someone. It matters to me. If you have kids in the school system matters to you. If you don't have kids in the school system, you might be interested in something else. And that's really what it's about. It's about finding all these aspects of government that we're all affected by in one way or another, but we don't always have an ability to see into. And so transparency is enabling people, but it's really about, reinvigorating our democracy, right? The democratic process in our country, from the local level all the way up, requires participation, informed participation. You can't just show up once every 4 years and cast a vote for someone who seems the most charismatic or the most likable or whatever it might be. You really, you want to be informed and care, and it's hard to be informed in this day and age fully. There's so much information, right? I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose. And transparency allows, through the open data initiatives at the federal level and other levels, allows people to sort of build their own mashups of data, right? So I can build a website that shows you something you care about. I might build a website for someone else that shows them something they care about. And those all are different lenses and different views that the citizens of a community can look at and pick and choose. And hopefully, as someone who gave a session earlier today who actually works in municipal government said, he said, and there were a number of people there that agreed with us. They said, we only hear from about 1% of the citizenry, and we always hear from the same 1%. And it isn't really fair to the other 99%, but they're the ones who show up, right? They come to all the hearings and the board meetings, and so they kind of influence things. And for a lot of people, right? I mean, for me, I work 35 miles from where I live, and by the time I got out of work, the city council starts at 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the evening. I'm at work until 7 o'clock at night. Even if I tried to leave my office at 5, it would take me an hour and a half to get home in that rush hour traffic, right? So it's about, how do I find ways to use video like this recording we're making, right? Why don't we have more videos of every meeting and every board hearing and everything else, indexed? If it's possible to put agendas up ahead of time so people can actually read the agenda and then say, oh, line item 3, I care about that, so I will tune into that video, and hopefully it's live cast, but it's also on YouTube or some other channel later. You know, I don't know if Arlington Independent Media has you guys use YouTube, right? Some folks use, you know, they actually have their own website and they just, you know, podcast or video cast from there. But all these things that are making government more approachable on a time that fits my lifestyle, right? Because this is not necessarily our parents or our grandparents' generation where, you know, we did everything within 5 miles of where we lived. And, you know, you were home by, you know, by before sunset every day, and, you know, you could go to the town meetings. You know, now things happen all the time, 24/7, either in our personal lives or in government. And transparency is about just kind of opening it up and saying, hey, come on in and participate. This is your government. And that's really what I'm promoting. And that's been, you know, a lot of excitement and fun around that, and frustration, for sure. But, you know, groups like the Sunlight Foundation, I mean, and if you saw the crowd here earlier, I mean, we had, you know, they stopped selling tickets, right? It was sold out again this year. Over 450 people showed up. It's just phenomenal turnout. We had the CTO from the administration was here, Todd Park, this morning. Very excitable, you know, gentleman to talk about and hear what he was saying, and we all get pumped up about that. And there's people from all over the world here. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to some of our overseas visitors, and that's like the one thing that I found humbling. You know, for as much struggle as I've had in trying to pursue transparency, the worst that's ever happened to me is either, you know, no return email, no return phone call, or maybe a snub by a politician. I talked to people here last year and this year, and they tell you stories about, you know, people attempting to assassinate them in their country, be it in Latin America or in Asia or whatever, because they asked too many questions. So we really are fortunate, you know, where it's like, all right, boy, I'm kind of a wimp for complaining about getting no reply to my email. No one's shooting at me. I'm good with that, you know, but it means we shouldn't get lazy either. We have to take advantage of that. So James Turk and the Open States Project, they actually moved up to Boston. That's where they run that out of now. And they're doing an Open Cities initiative now. And so those efforts are now, we're empowering people to say, all right, your local municipality. And so some cities and towns have been very good about saying, well, here's our electronic data, we'll help publish it, you know, with the right requests, we'll help publish it. And other cities and towns are looking for resources, but they're now seeing that it's doable. And the biggest gap that I think we've seen that addressed is most people in government, it's not that they don't want to be transparent, they either don't know how, or they're not sure if they can, or they don't have the resources to. And what we're saying is, look, there's this community of tens of thousands of people that want to help. And it's free labor and free resources. They can kind of come in and help make your job actually easier, because you won't have to deal with me showing up once a week to ask questions or calling you or emailing you. You know, you provide your data in some acceptable form, we agree on how I can get the data, and there it is. And in Massachusetts, we had a really good success story with our transportation office, where they actually set up a developer challenge. You know, they basically said, here's our data feed, you have to agree to our rules, and there was a prize. The first year they ran the project, they had dozens of project submissions and ideas, and the prize was a 1-year all-you-can-ride the public transit system pass. That was it. The next time they ran the contest, there were $1,500 in cash prizes, but that were donated by private companies. So it didn't cost the state anything. And they got all these massive enhancements. Now there's like 50 apps that have been developed to help people who use the buses and trains and so forth within the state of Massachusetts. And it was all developed at no cost to the taxpayer. And it's made the people who use public transit, it's made their lives easier. So I mean, that's a win-win, right? And that's kind of taking advantage of sort of, you know, the law of large numbers and the wisdom of the crowds, and saying, here's all this, you know, sort of cognitive surplus, to steal a term from Clay Shirky. But basically the idea of, you know, the wisdom of the crowds and tapping into what people can do when you can contribute a little time, and she can contribute a little time, and I can contribute a little time, and we pool our resources thanks to the internet. And you have things like Wikipedia, right? I mean, Wikipedia fundamentally put, you know, Encyclopedia Britannica out of business, right? And they acknowledged that, and they did it with grace, and they said, okay, we're no longer publishing the encyclopedia. But who would have thought? I mean, if you went back 10 years in time and said, there's going to be an encyclopedia, it's going to be online, anyone can edit it, and it'll be free. But I paid $1,500 for the set of encyclopedias, and it's obsolete? What do you mean? I have a set of Britannicas at home I bought. I cannot give them away. I'm shipping them overseas to India, to a private little school in some private village, because of a contact I have. He's like, oh yeah, they'd love to have your encyclopedias, because they don't have the internet. The federal level is an interesting, it's too big to me. I mean, it's good, it's got to happen. It doesn't have the impact the state one does. And the states, the cities and towns, you know, what we want to go back is that every one of in Massachusetts, 351 cities and towns, everyone should be an experimental lab with how people can be participating in their democratic form of government and how they can look and participate. And those best ideas, and it should create a competition, right? And the idea is, if you can rate the cities and towns, now I can decide, well, where do I want to live? I want to live in a town where the government is more open and responsive, and I can move over there. State to state, it's the same idea, right? Certain states have benefits over others. I see ads in Massachusetts trying to lure people to move to California, businesses and individuals, right? So when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor of California, there was a giant billboard near Logan International Airport. Hey, come to California. It was like, why are you advertising here to move to California? But it was because he was trying to show that California was a better place to be, because they wanted our talent. And I think that transparency is something that, it isn't, like I said, an end unto itself, but it's a means to a better, healthy civil society.
All right.